So we got two talks this afternoon. Tony Cochran needs no introduction, so I won't give him one. And Egbert Eiken. Sorry, my pronunciation. I'm still practicing that.
Better than mine.
I guess we should kind of take a 5-minute break or something in the middle to recover from Kerry before Egbert hits us with, great, so.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for organizing this, and thanks for everybody for the discussion so far. Very good. So what I want to present is, so I changed the title, so Chief Models of Univalent Type Theory. So Chief Models, so they have been, they exist and they have been really important for higher order logic. And what are some applications of Chief models? So independence result. Okay. So for instance, countable choice cannot be proved in higher order logic. That will be the choice. Okay. And the other applications are consistency. So consistency proof. So you build model of new principles that are interesting for higher order logic, like FAM theorem. So you get model of higher order logic with FAM theorem. And it has been an important problem for dependent type theory, that there was no notion so far of, until now, what I will present is work in progress, but there is no, there are problems to do the same but with dependent types, and especially with the universe. So what I will present is one way to do Chief models for type theory with univalence and propositional truncation. And one application that I will present is the following theorem. So in univalent type theory, so type theory extended with axiom, univalence axiom, and propositional truncation. You cannot prove, one cannot prove, doesn't prove. Univalent type theory does not prove countable choice. And countable choice is formulated in a very elegant way in univalent type theory. It's formulated as if you have, so for all family of type not, if you have for all n is not inhabited of A of n, and then for all n in n, and you can even ask A to be a family of sets. So you can have also extra condition that A is a family of sets. So this principle is a way to formulate countable choice, and this is not provable in univalent type theory. And one can prove this, so one follows the method which is used in higher order logic. One will build a model where this will be true and this will not be true. That's a good focus. So that's an application of this, why one is interested Chief model of type theory. So other applications are, if we do Chief model of site, so for instance, we may want to have a nominal univalent type theory, or there are other applications also, relative concept. So, for instance, if you do Chief model over 0, 1, what you get intuitively, so it's a type theory where everything depends continuously on something varying between 0 and 1. And this can be interesting to have a type theory with these properties. Okay. So in order to do that, so first we need a suitable notion of model of type theory. So I will describe quickly how it's the structure of this model of type theory, because Andy considers them to be very complicated. So I want to show that they are not that complicated. So there are pre-shift models. First, pre-shift models over a particular category that I will not describe, but I will use the letter IJK for the object of this base category. So that will be so what is a pre-shift over this? So that will be a family of set gamma of I with restriction map. So you have gamma of I is a map J whenever you have a map F from J to I in the base category. So that will be a pre-shift like this. And in this pre-shift, so you have the particular pre-shift omega. Okay, and inside omega, you have a special sub-pre-shift of omega that will classify what is called cofibration.
What is omega?
Sorry?
What is omega?
Omega is the sub-object classifier. So omega of I is a set of sim on I. And F, so that will be, so it's known as a dominance, a special kind of dominance, which classifies so what is called as cofibration. So it's called like this in the terminology. So you have a class of map that are cofibrations. And by a notion which is so standard in this kind of work, by orthogonality, you define, you know what is a trivial fibration. So trivial fibration will be a map that has the lifting property with respect to this class of map.
So you assume that all cofibrations are monomorphisms?
So all cofibrations are monomorphism, but for constructive purpose, it's important that, as shown by Andrew Swan, so you cannot constructively, for this, assume that all monomorphisms are cofibrations. So that's a nice actually result. So that will, so now you know, given this, you know what are cofibrations and what are trivial fibrations. And then, so I don't go into the detail, I want only to give the overall picture. There is another object, so special to this category, which will play the role of the interval. Okay, so that will be, so you can define another pre-shift, which is the interval object. And so what is important in the interval is that you have two points. You have the terminal object, and you have 2 points, 0 and 1, that are in the interval. So, yeah, so trivial fibration. Yeah. So once you have this, you can define the notion of open box.
And you want equal to 0 to be.
Yeah, so I don't, yeah, oh yeah. So if you want actually, there's been work by Andy and Jan about the axiomatic, what you need, what kind of axioms you need to get the property. And so one axiom will be that 0. What you need is 0 is different from 1.
But I mean, you need some connection between cofibrations and properties of the interval, right?
Yeah, right, yes. But I don't want to
Oh, I see.
list the axioms. It's only the overall picture of this. So once you have this, you can define the notion of open box. And this notion of open box is given by the cofibration, something classified by F. And so one point inclusion, so either 0 or 1. I will write only 0. So you can do what is called product of this. So what you get is A times I union B times 0. Point, base point, which is included into B times I. Okay? And that's, you can see this as an open box. So the open box will be the case where this is the boundary of B, and then this is the base of the box, and this is the A is the boundary of this, so you get an open box. And once, so you have this class of map, and there will be the generating trivial cofibration. So you define the fibration generality to be exactly the class of map that have the orthogonality with respect to this class of
Sorry, I missed it. A to B is assumed to be cofiberic.
Yeah, that's so classified by F. So you have okay, and this has been studied actually by Cieszynski, and Cieszynski calls this naive fibration. Because in his setting, it's not always the case that you get a model structure by doing this. And so what is particular with base categories that we use is that we can use the simple notion of naive fibration as our definition of fibration. That's starting point. So now you have the notion of co-fibration, fibration, and what you have also at this level is, and by orthogonality, you have also trivial cofibration. So trivial cofibration will be a cofibration that is orthogonal to all fibration. Okay, so you have this class of maps. So you know what is a trivial fibration, trivial cofibration, what is a cofibration, and what is a fibration. So what is left is what is an equivalence. So a weak equivalence. So how can we define notion of weak equivalence? And one possible way to do it, that was shown by Christian Sattler, is the following: is that if you have a map between any cubical set, so in this, I will call cubical set a presheaf on this, you have, you can actually at this level, you can describe the two factorization of this map. So one will be the trivial cofibration, and the other will be a trivial fibration, cofibration. And this you can do at this level. So it's possible to describe for any map F the two effectively what are the two decompositions of this map. So once you have this, so I will let's call this P and Q, okay, trivial cofibrations, fibrations. Then there is a natural candidate for defining what F, when F should be an equivalence. Okay, that's what you want, a weak equivalence. And then the definition that you get is that this map P should be a trivial fibration. By definition, P is a trivial fibration. And you know what this means. Okay, and,
So, after you.
Sorry, so I'm a little kind of unsure that that can work in a constructive meta theory.
mm-hmm.
I mean, this decompositions, the small object arguments, they require some parts of.
So it's an inductive process, but which can be done in CZF. So the meta theory, CZF plus universes.
Converges after omega many steps using Richard Garner's
So
version of the small.
yeah, but so one decomposition. So I will try to remember which one. So I think this one is actually explicit. So it's given.
Isn't it just for mapping semantically?
Yeah, not well. Oh, yeah,
Par-
kind of.
partial map.
So this one is very actually easy. So this I'm sure, and this one requires.
So can you take the easy one and say something's an equivalence if
Yeah. So exactly. So
If
you will
that's
be able to. Yeah.
if that's a vibration?
That's also this one. Yes.
Yeah. So
But let's call this
so I don't need to know about the small
Q prime and B prime. Yeah, you want both.
Really?
Yes, for Christian's arguments. Yeah. So you can define it as if and only if Q prime is a trivial cofibration. And once again, I mean, I don't want to go into the details. So indeed, so there is an issue there. It's an inductive process, and one has to represent this inductive process in a constructive meta theory.
Just this may be a detail I don't want to go into, but one thing which seems at the heart of this is whether the fibrations have a lifting operation or just existence properties for the lifting.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So very interesting because both for trivial fibration and fibration. So there is something nice is that, so for example, let's say trivial fibration. So you want to say whether or not is a trivial fibration. So you will, a priori, you have to say that it has a lifting property with respect to any cofibration. Okay? But actually, there is one generic cofibration, so that as soon as you have, so there is one generic square like this, as soon as you have a lifting for this square, you have the lifting for any possible square. So to have this, it's enough to have it for this particular generic thing. And once you have it for these generic things, you don't need choice. I mean, you need only exist. So there will be one lifting, and this lifting, from it, you can derive a structure, lifting structure. So something that will lift for any square. Yeah.
So what's the relationship between being a weak equivalence and being equivalent in the sense of having contractible fibers?
So if both A and B are fibrant, then this is the same as having, at least in this case, this will be the same as having contractible fiber. All fibers are contractible.
Do you need to consider this when they're not fibrant?
Yeah, because you want, I mean, so what I'm describing now, so it's, so you get a notion of weak equivalence, fibration, co-fibrations, and you get actually a model structure on cubical set, and in a constructive meta table. So that's Christian Sattler model structure, okay, that you get. And one of the key lemma is that you have univalent universe. So you use this univalent universe. And for having a univalent universe, so this follows from the lemma that we have about gluing operation. And I want only to describe what this gluing operation does, because this will be, so what this gluing operation does is the following. So if you have a type over a component gamma, and then you have a cofibration delta, and you do the pullback. And you have, okay, and you have an equivalence over this. Then you can find T prime, which is, I mean, which intuitively extends T over gamma. And that's exactly the diagram that you have for proving univalence in the simplicial set model. So you have exactly the same diagram.
Is that twiddle the same as that twiddle, or is it?
And this twiddle is equivalence, but we are in the case where there are fibrant. So this can be defined as any fiber is contractible. So this gluing operation is this. It extends this equivalence to this one. And what happens is that in our setting, this implies that the universe has a kind of composition, which implies that the universe has a kind of filling. So that's the structure of the model. From the fact, so we get the universe is fibrant. And using this, you can prove actually that you get a model structure with this definition. So this is not that complicated. I mean, the overall structure of the thing.
I'm sorry, may
Yeah.
interrupt for a second more. I got a little lost. What is our base category?
So the base category is the category which is used for cubical sets.
I see. So then of course you can claim that there are kind of omega limits and everything is fine.
Yeah.
Because I thought that you're talking about a general base category.
No, so no, at this point you, yeah.
No,
But
that-
even actually, yeah, I think even with general category, this can be done, but we.
But then you need kind of limits up to the size of the category, roughly speaking. who knows? I mean, there's some axiom of choice for that. I don't know how it works.
Okay, so maybe we can look at this, yeah, because that's, but in any case, for concrete, I mean, when C is given concretely, so in the case we are looking at, so I, J are finite sets. And the notion of morphism is a little complicated. So I don't
But it's
want-
decidable.
And it's everything
Whether
is
two
decidable.
things are
Yeah.
equal morphisms
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah. So that's the overall picture, and but why I describe this, yeah, is that so the point I want to stress is that contrary to the simple set model, everything is done with explicitly with effective operations. So in particular, this will be effectively described. The lifting, there was a question about the lifting property. The lifting property will be whenever you have a lifting problem. So if this is a vibration and you have a lifting problem, you will get an explicit map that will solve this. So everything is given by operations. Okay? And why is this important in this setting? Is that everything you do, we do for this model automatically transfers for Preshift model over this. And that's so that's the main remark. So since everything is done, so everything can be done with an extra parameter. Okay. So if you have a category, another category, so where objects are V, W, and so on, okay, I can look now at Preshift with value in cubical set. So what is this? So instead of before I had gamma, which was depending only on I, now I will have gamma I and V, which depends on I and V. So I will be a finite set, and V will be an object of my category. And then, so whenever I have a map from J to I have a restriction map like this. Okay. And whenever I have a map from W to V, I will have a map like this, restriction map like this, and all, so I had operations, so all operations will commute with these maps. That I call the restriction map.
Sorry, is this equivalent to cubical set enriched?
Yeah, enrich, what does it mean?
It means so you have an enriched category, every home of this category now is a cubical set.
Yeah, so you can view it like that. So if you, yeah,
Okay.
so if you look at this,
Yes.
okay, then this is a cubical set.
Is the
Because this itself, it sends I,
yes.
gamma I. So we can look, so an ordinary Preshift from this category will be f of V is a set, but you can say that now you have gamma of V is a cubical set. And indeed this will help.
And when you move on the first thing, everything is a cubical map and so on.
Yeah, and so on, yeah, yeah. So
Yes,
that's,
so then it's a cubical.
Yeah. So what you ask about the operation is that they commute with restriction. So and then everything that we do at this level, in particular, so the Christian Sattler model structure will apply this. So you get a model structure also with Preshift cubical sets.
So just a remark,
Yeah.
why I asked this is because there is something called by push value, some calculus kind of thing, and there the models are of this kind of form.
Okay. So
Yes. So I don't know if this is relevant. I mean, it doesn't seem relevant at the moment, but these things have a lot of structure.
okay. So this means that for pre-shifts, we don't have any problem to consider pre-shift values cubical sets. So, and that's the difference with a simplicial set, because for simplicial sets, so the difference is that we don't have to do anything to get a model structure or to get a model of type theory with an extra parameter, because everything we did was constructed. And for simplicial set, it's actually much more complicated to get a model structure on simplicial pressures.
Do you know, what the properties are of the base model structure in cubical sets that means that you can, in homotopy theory generally, it's a big issue to carry a model structure up from a category to pre-sheaves in that category. It's a hugely complicated thing. Do you know what's making it work?
I think you should ask Christian, but I think the answer will be something like it's an algebraic, maybe because it's an it's an algebraic model structure, and
And it's naive
naive.
in the sense of it's
Yes, I guess.
And there's everything sort of done pointwise, which is
Yeah.
absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, so it's given by operations. So
Yeah.
So now that's fine for pre-shifts, but for for countable choice, for a model of countable choice, we need a shift. So, but then, so we want to expand this to shifts, and actually, so we will look at the simplest possible example of a space where there is a shift situation, and this will be, almost the simplest. So it will be a space which is given by as a formal space with 4 opens. So that's this, because then X is covered by V0 and V1, and the intersection is non-empty. So I want to define what is a sheaf for a cubical sheaf for this space. So this is not enough for getting a countable choice, but for countable choice, so we need this space. It has almost, so now it's infinitely many open.
Sorry, so that's
So,
now maybe it lost now. We are going to take shifts on a space or
Yeah,
shifts
so,
on a
so
side?
we look at this as a poset of open.
Okay, so we fix the X now.
We fix the
Okay,
space X.
then it's
Yeah,
fine, fine.
and then we know that we have, so what is a pre-sheaf
Yeah.
on this? It's given by 4 cubical set with a map, with maps that preserve the composition, commute with composition. And we want, what should be a sheaf? We know what a pre-sheaf is, we want to define what is the sheaf. And for countable choice, the space is the following, so it's almost like this, so it has this. That's the simplest topological space I found to get a counter model to countable choice. Maybe Martin, simpler one. Yeah, but I think it has to be infinite.
Yeah.
So for countable choice, it will be almost the same as what we are going to do there, but it will be this space instead. So what should be the sheaf?
What are the colours in that one?
So there, x0 is, so I should say the semantics of this. So I look at the space 0, 1, where I include 0, I don't include 1. Xn is this, and Rn is this. So x0 is covered by x1 and R1. And at each step, xn is covered by xn plus 1 and Rn.
And all arrows are monomorphisms.
And all arrows, yes, that's the open inclusion. So that's a poset. Really. So I write it like that, but it's a poset and oriented in the other direction. So, okay, so now the question is what is a sheaf? What should be the definition of sheaf? That's where. So there is another contribution of Christian Sattler, that the natural, attempt of having a definition will get much simpler by using some category theory. Okay. So intuitively, so what should be a sheaf? So we look at so A of x. So it's really A of x of I. We have two parameters, but I look only at first, the intuitive picture. So I have one cubical set, order cubical V0. So I have four cubical sets like this. Okay. And intuitively, so there are spaces. So what is descent data for A? At level x. Okay, so descent data. Well, it should be a point in U0 in A of. So we look at this now as spaces. There are spaces. We have four spaces. So we have a point in A of V0, a point in A of V1. Okay, and we can look at the restriction in A of V0 intersection V1. So I will still call them U0 and V1, this restriction. And what we have is a path between these 2 points. So that's a descent data. So we say that they are compatible, but not strictly compatible, but path compatible. So whenever we have this, we should be able to glue them together and find find something in A of V, A of X, which restrict to U0, path restrict to, so what we should find is a U, so that with a path U to U0, a path U to U1, and a square like this. So, because we have square.
Is it, there's some reason why you're not saying the word stack?
Yeah, so that's a stack.
Sure.
But yeah, so this is, yeah, so, but naively in time theory, you take the definition of sheaf, and if you look at the definition of sheaf, then you have an issue there. What equality should you say? In what sense are they compatible? So one is that they are strictly equal, and the other is that propositionally equal. Propositionally equal.
But A of V0 is a cubical set, right?
Yeah.
Well, so we can't really say stack, because we don't have a definition of what a stack is, cubical set.
Yes, I suppose in the sense he's giving us one.
Now,
Yeah.
in this, yeah.
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 So the remark of Christian Sattler is that is the following: is that actually, so this is a descent data of X. So what we are looking at is so we have a presheaf A, and we are looking for a new presheaf D of A that will be the presheaf of descent data. And what we have is that any object in A, by restriction, gives the descent data. Maybe if I have a point at this level, if I restrict it, then I get a trivial descent data. I expect to have a map like this. And a definition of when A will be a sheaf will be that this map is an equivalence.
Here you also want V0 to X and other these things to be cofibrations.
What maps?
This monomorphisms from which everything is built, are they cofibrations?
No.
So the map from AX to A over B0 is not a fibration.
No, all you know at this level is that it preserves composition. Okay. Okay, so what's the hallmark of Christian is that we can organize this in a simpler way, actually. That actually this D of A is an exponential. A to the F. So we have a special presheaf F, so which will depend on like this, so that A to the F will be exactly what we want for the descent data. So what is this presheaf? So it's so I have to say what it is at level X. So it's empty. At level V0, it's a point V0. At level V1, it's a point 1. Okay. So it's cubical set. So they are not 500 cubical set. So we have map, trivial map like this. And then what is F of V0 intersection V1? So it's the interval. Right? So you have a map from 0 to starting point of the interval, and not from 1 to the end point of the interval. So this is a special simplicial set, and if I want to write it explicitly, so f of xi is empty, f of x v0 is constant at v0, f of x v1 is constant at v1, and f of x and f of v0 I is this, f of v1 I is this, and f of v0 intersection v1 I is, so this interval object looks like that. So this is a set. So I have a family of set and I have restriction map like this. So this is a presheaf like this, and the descent data is like this. Okay, so now I can define what is it to be a sheaf. It will be that this map is an equivalence. So this map M. Okay, so that will be my definition of what it means to be a sheaf. Yeah.
And so this was the sheaf condition for one particular cover.
Yeah.
And then there could be multiple covers that run.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So in general, so for instance, that will be an example of multiple cover. So the general. So now what I will do is that I will work in. So I will look in the type theory of so presheaf. Inside, I have a model of type theory with univalence, which are the presheaf satisfying the Kahn condition. I have this model structure at this level. And now I will do a purely internal construction. So F, so remark is that F is not phi-1.
So this is if you have a cover of two things. If you
Yeah.
have a cover of three things, how is
Yes, that's a good question. Yeah, so I will come back to this later. But it's already good to look at this case because that's actually I mean, what we are going to see is that once you have expressed it like that, you can look at what are the properties on F that you need in order to get a model of type theory. And then that will be from this you can see what you need when you have three things and so on.
Okay, is it going to be gluing kind of push-outs of many of pairwise Fs?
Yeah, we will see. Yeah.
So it's of no significance in this that D is a monad.
Yeah, very significant. Yeah. That will be the. I mean, this also what happens. It will play a crucial role. So now I will work in. So now I will work in type theory. So almost syntactically, because now I have the structure. So what is the structure? I have type theory with the notion of phi-1c, phi-1 object. I have this F, which is not phi-1, but A to the F is phi-1 if A is phi-1. So now I can look at this. And so what you have, so now you work in type theory. And so in order to cover the case, general case, so you will have a family code F. So in general, you don't have only one covering, but you have a family of covering for a type code. Okay? And F of C doesn't need to be finite. So I will define to be, whenever I have this situation, I introduce a predicate S of A, which is for all C equal is equal of MA. So this map. So now you have for each C, I have a constant map MAC. Like this. So S of A is always fibrant if A is fibrant. So, and it's a proposition. And then that should be the definition of what it means to be a sheaf. And we want a model of type theory. So what we will need is the following property on this predicate, is that if I have for all x in A, S of B of x, then I want S of pi x in A, B of x. Okay, so the product of sheaves is a sheaf. And this you can check, I mean, the level of syntax with no condition on F of C. Other condition is if you add the condition S of A and this, then you need S of sigma. So this is still valid, and you don't need any condition on F. And the same for path. So if you have S of A, then S of path is 0 for any element. So now what will be nice is if the universe of sheaf is a sheaf. So what you want is this, S of sigma x in U, sheaf of x. So U is a universe of fibrant sheaf. So all, when I write, I mean the A, B, and so on, they range over fibrant sheaf. And the only thing which is not fibrant is F of C. And what is remarkable is that at this, once it's formulated at this level, I mean the proof of all these properties are simple, and the proof of even of this for the universe is simple as well. So I will. But now I need an extra property on this F of C, family F of C. And what is it? It's so as Martin observed, I mean this A to the F, this operation is a monad, and there is a notion of idempotent monad. So I need that this operation defines an idempotent monad. So what does this mean? This means that there are, I mean, different ways to state it, and one way is that if you look at F of C, so if you iterate it, F of C and F of C, okay, you have two projections, pi1 and pi2. Okay. What you need is that whenever you look at A pi1 and A pi2, they are path equal. That's one possible definition of being idempotent, and it's equivalent to, if you look at delta, A is a delta is an equivalence. And what is nice is that, I mean, this was observed actually by Mike Schulman, that the notion of idempotent monad was important, and this is an example.
So here, the monad is idempotent only up to equivalence, not up to isomorphism?
On the universal path equality. Yeah. Okay. So one for getting this, one sufficient condition not necessarily, but sufficient is that for f of c you have this. So if you take two elements of f of c, they are path connected. So since f of c is not phi bond, I cannot say f of c is a proposition, but this is almost, I mean, f of c is a proposition. So this is sufficient. So this will imply that they are path equal. This is an equivalence. And this is so this is an example of a modality and left exact modality, and this has been studied by Bass, Reike, and Mike Schulman. So once you have this, I mean, this has a really nice property, is that in order, so in this case, when it is when you have these conditions, so when you have this condition, this is an equivalence as soon as it has a left inverse. So it's in order to prove that something is an equivalence, it's enough to find the left inverse of this map. Okay. And for the universe, what happens is that there is a natural map from UFC to U. So there is a constant map, and there is a natural map L, which is if you give me a family of types over f of c, L of A is defined to be pi f of c x. Take the product of this family. So that's a natural map from U f of c to U. And let us compute the composition of, if you start from a type T, and we apply M, and then we apply L, what do we get? So we get,
Sorry, what is U? U is the universe?
U is the universe,
Okay.
yeah, universe of types. So this. So, so I start from T, the type in U. Okay, so what is M of T is a constant family. So I write F instead of F of C. Constant family T. What is L of M of T is T to the F. But if T happens to be a sheaf, T to the F is equal to T by univalence, because the map from T to the F is an equivalence, so they are equal. So this means that if you restrict this map to the S predicate, S is a predicate, you get a left inverse. And at this point, you need that the universe is univalent to get the left inverse. And this is an instance of this general phenomena. So you get all those properties about the S things. And no, so it's a purely syntactical construction, shows that you get a new model of time theory where you interpret a type not by a the can presheaf. You interpret a type by the can presheaf, which is the sheaf or stack.
It's got something to do with I was looking at a paper recently where you have what is it, a monad also on the universe as well as, do you know what I mean? It's in a conference in January by the guys who do the sort of proof by translation within calculus of instruction.
Yeah, so exactly. So that's an
The
instance
names
of
of
Pierre-Marie Pedro and Nicolas Tabarot. Yeah, exactly. So that's an instance of this.
Yeah.
So maybe I end by this, describing this translation once again, because it's very simple. So once you have, as soon as you have a S like this, you define, and you have so it's syntax. Then you can do an internal translation, which translates term. Okay, so this will be an operation which will produce, if you apply it to a type, it will give you a type with a proof that this type is a stack. And so in variable, so it's very simple on term. It's a little more complex on types, but it's still. So you have two translations. One translation for term, and then for a type, you define this. So for if A is a type, the translation of A will be a pair, which will be a type, and a proof that this type is a sheaf. So you define this to be, this is a first projection of A. I will take this first projection of this translation. So this is M. And then what the translation on types. So if you have a type like this, so this will be translated by, well, first I need the translation of U. Okay, so U is the set this type, and the proof that this is a stack, a sheaf. Okay, that I have a proof there. The translation of this is it's a pair. The first component is the type, and then you apply this proof that pi preserves the fact that it is a sheaf, and the same for sigma. So this is purely syntactical, and this translation has a really nice property that whenever you are in a context like this, you derive M equals K. Whenever you have this, you prove by induction that you have no, it's a purely syntactical description, but it corresponds exactly what you do when you check that you have a model where a type is a sheaf. And what is important about this is that it does not matter for getting a model, it does not matter what the value of this is, it only matters that you have a proof of this.
So they don't have to satisfy anything.
Yeah, you can ask, maybe I need to check some computation rule for this constant, it does not matter. You can do this without knowing for this translation to work. So this is a little similar to, I mean, what, so for example, and the same for can simplicial set. So can is a property. So it's almost like
S is contractible.
S is a proposition. So you can say, but still, it's, you can think maybe it will matter for checking that if n is convertible to n. This translation has a remarkable property that this is. Okay. and at pure level of conversion. So this is, and what this does is really if you apply it to a term type A, this translation will compute by induction on A the proof that the semantics of A is a type. And so that's what happened. So what is good is that with this remark of Christian that descent data is an exponential, a lot of checking can be done at a purely syntactical level, which is nice actually for being sure that everything is right. And then so it answers to, I mean this is, so now if you have 3 opens and you want to see what f should be, then what you will have to check is that f satisfies this idempotency condition. So, and then one example, I mean, so, and then, but it does not matter the way you do it. You have several choices. So what is the descent data with 3 open? Because, so you have this situation with 3 open, B0, B1, B2. So, and already for, I mean, actually already for 2 open, you can formulate descent data differently, which will be more, so that you can see that it generalized. So what you can say is that you have U0, U1, and you have U01, an extra point, which is equal to U0 and equal to U1.
Yeah.
So this is another way to formulate the descent data, and this has still the property that it defines an idempotent. And so you can do the same here. You will ask U0, U1, U2, and 3 points U02, U12, U012. So you get something which is more symmetric, which clearly generalizes. So,
Yeah,
yeah. So there, I mean, there is something to be said about natural number. So natural number for this example and for the countable choice is type of natural number is a sheaf. Okay, but it's not the case in general that the constant presheaf is a sheaf. So you have to be careful if your space is connected, like it is here. So it's connected, so the constant thing is. But if you take a Boolean algebra, so counter space, then it's totally disconnected. And then you have to do something about this. So you have to refine this construction. So this is what I said. So this is work in progress. I know how to do that on special spaces, totally disconnected, connected. I know the example of nominal set, type of nominal set. Other example where you mix totally disconnected, connected, but it will be nice to have a more general picture. Okay, thank you. Yep.
So this feels a bit like gluing. So
Yep.
if I restrict the pi and the sigma to simply type, can I describe this exactly as gluing? As you do in Cartesian closed category.
Different sort of gluing from the one there.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm talking about categorical glue.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, not really real gluing, not sconing. You know what I mean?
It has to be
It
some
has to
kind.
be gluing.
Sorry.
It has to be some kind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a purely syntactical remark. So whenever you
No,
have
but
S, which
even
is
if
like-
you
yeah.
take the usual categorical gluing, it looks like this because when you
Yeah,
glue, you
yeah,
get the
yeah,
category you
yeah.
project, and the fact that you are exponentiating is related. Gluing works well with exponential. Really. I mean, if you want to make it work with some types, it's complicated. So you can still do it, but it's complicated. So I just wonder.
You've just got one component in which, as it were, forgetting is a logical something.
That's right.
Right, yes.
So,
It should be a very simple case.
Here should be a simple case of glue.
So has anybody looked at the old work of Kelly's on property two monads and just, as it were, seen what happens, how it sort of dissipates itself across this point of view? Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, there's a whole, if you have a, I mean, it's not in this world, but if you have a monad for structure on a category, a two monad of some kind, I mean, there's a difference between the case, a general case, and a case where it's a property that the category has it, and that includes kind of lax and co-lax idempotent for two monads. And there's a whole lot of kind of categorical algebra there, which is sort of just dissipating itself into the fact that everything's kind of homotopic here. But it's quite interesting to look at that,
So
because
this,
it's sort of just somehow to compare what's happening with that which is much more algebraic to this, which is much more homotopic.
And what is where I was surprised is that it gets simpler actually.
Yeah, no, I mean that's kind of
which
weird,
is not
right?
Yeah, so something also I should have said is that this condition on F is that this map is an equivalence. I mean, you can really, for the model structure of Christian, this condition that F to the delta is always an equivalence for any F I want. It's exactly that this map is an equivalence as I defined the equivalence in the model structure. I should have said that. So you can formulate it more concisely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Jamie. Well, just over 5 minutes.